John Harrington was once just an ordinary man with dreams as big as the sky but with barely enough in his pocket to buy coffee. Back then, he had something far more valuable than money. He had Emily, his childhood sweetheart and wife, who believed in his dreams with unwavering faith. Emily was his best friend, his confidant, and his partner through years of struggle and sacrifice. Together, they had faced every obstacle, each hardship drawing them closer as they supported one another through the long nights of uncertainty and the sting of failures. As time passed, John's relentless drive, combined with Emily's steady encouragement, paid off. His business ideas began to gain traction. And slowly, fortune favored him. His company grew. His wealth multiplied. And the boy with big dreams transformed into a millionaire. John was now a force in the world of business, surrounded by luxury and influence. Yet, amid this newfound wealth and success, something essential started to slip away. The demands of high society and the allure of a luxurious lifestyle began to change John. He was swept into a world of glitz and glamour that once felt distant and unimaginable. Fancy parties, prestigious circles, and constant attention became his new reality. One that left little room for the humble beginnings he had shared with Emily. Slowly but surely, the life they had built together started to fracture. As John became more enamored with wealth and status than with the things that had once brought him genuine happiness, Emily noticed the shift. She saw the warmth in his eyes begin to fade, replaced by a calculating, almost distant gaze. He began to grow impatient with her gentle reminders of their past and their shared dreams, brushing off her concerns as remnants of a life he wanted to leave behind. She felt her place in his world diminishing. And despite her attempts to remind him of the love that once bound them, John's priorities lay elsewhere. He saw her as a shadow of his old life, one that he wanted to move on from in pursuit of new, more glamorous experiences. It was during this vulnerable time that he met Mia, a strikingly beautiful young model who lived in the fast lane. Mia was everything his new world admired: bold, captivating, and completely carefree. She symbolized the kind of life John had convinced himself he deserved. One filled with excitement and devoid of reminders of the struggles he had left behind. Drawn in by her charm and allure, John's heart wandered, and his loyalty to Emily began to waver. Emily, sensing the growing distance, tried to hold on, hoping John would remember the love they shared. But soon, it became clear that her love wasn't enough to keep him by her side. She knew that in John's eyes. She had become part of the past he was determined to escape. With a heavy heart and immense pain, Emily let him go, wishing him happiness even though it broke her own heart. In a swift, bittersweet turn, their marriage ended quietly. With only a few tears and even fewer words, Emily left, carrying with her the memories of their years together and the quiet heartbreak of a woman who had loved deeply and lost. John, meanwhile, stepped into his new life with Mia, believing he had everything he ever wanted. At first, life with Mia seemed like a dream. They traveled, attended the most exclusive events, and became a picture-perfect couple in society. Yet, as time passed, John began to notice cracks in this idealized life. Mia's interests lay only in fleeting pleasures and indulgences. She was uninterested in anything deeper or lasting. She had little patience for John's troubles and even less understanding of the person he had been before his wealth. Slowly, John found himself feeling isolated and unfulfilled, a hollow echo of the man he once was. Loneliness began to creep in, though he buried it beneath lavish parties and fleeting distractions. Yet, in moments of silence, memories of Emily, of her warm smile and unwavering support, would come flooding back. He realized, to his dismay, that the richness of his new life paled in comparison to the joy he had once known with her. And for the first time, John began to feel the cold sting of regret. As John sat in his empty mansion, surrounded by reminders of his wealth yet devoid of true companionship, he found himself haunted by a single, lingering question: had he sacrificed the one thing that truly mattered in pursuit of a life he no longer wanted? And with that thought came a sense of loss so deep, it left him yearning for something he could not easily reclaim, the love he had let slip away. In the life he had left behind, John Harrington had always been a man with fire in his heart. He dreamed of breaking free from the limits of his humble beginnings, envisioning a life filled with success and significance. Through every late night and every failure, he had one person who stood by him: his wife, Emily. Emily was not only his wife but his anchor, the steady force in his life who reminded him of his roots, his purpose, and the beauty in simple things. Together, they weathered countless storms. There were nights they stayed up, huddled in their small apartment, talking about the future while eating takeout because they couldn't afford anything else. There were days when John felt defeated, his dreams feeling further away than ever. But Emily was always there, lifting his spirits, believing in him even when he struggled to believe in himself. Her faith in him was unwavering, her loyalty unmatched. They were more than a couple, they were a team. Then, after years of perseverance, John's big break finally came. His small company landed a major contract that catapulted his business to the next level. From there, success snowballed, profits soared, and John found himself stepping into a world of power and privilege he'd only ever seen from afar. Suddenly, he was dining with CEOs, vacationing at exclusive resorts, and invited to lavish parties. He had achieved everything he'd once dreamed of, and he was more determined than ever to hold on to it all. As his wealth and status grew, so did his responsibilities and pressures. Business meetings filled his days, and glamorous events filled his nights. The world John had once admired from the outside now enveloped him entirely. But with every step he took into this elite world, he drifted a little further from the life he'd shared with Emily. Emily noticed it first in the small things: the missed dinners, the forgotten anniversaries, the hurried goodbyes. John, who had once looked at her like she was his entire world, now seemed distracted, his mind occupied by thoughts and dreams that no longer included her. She tried to keep up with him, attending the glitzy parties and dressing to impress. But she felt out of place. Her love was simple, grounded in a life they had built together from scratch. But John was no longer content with simplicity. As John became increasingly drawn to the glamour of his new world, he began seeing Emily as a reminder of a past he was eager to leave behind. He brushed off her attempts to reconnect, dismissing her gentle reminders of their shared dreams as naive nostalgia. To him, Emily was like a shadow, something that lingered in the background, holding him back from fully embracing the high life he'd worked so hard for. Their connection, once vibrant and unbreakable, now felt strained and distant. It was around this time that John met Mia. She was everything Emily wasn't: young, bold, and electrifyingly glamorous. Mia turned heads wherever she went, her presence demanding attention and admiration. She represented the life John had fought so hard to reach, a life of excitement, beauty, and indulgence. With Mia, there were no reminders of his humble beginnings, no talk of past struggles or sacrifices. She offered him a fresh start, one that aligned perfectly with his new identity as a self-made millionaire. John's heart wavered, caught between his loyalty to Emily and his desire to experience everything Mia represented. Emily sensed the shift, felt him slipping away. But despite her efforts to hold on, She realized that John's love was no longer hers. He had become a stranger. A man consumed by ambition and blinded by the bright lights of his own success. And so, with a heart full of sadness and acceptance, Emily let him go. The divorce was quiet. Almost unspoken. There were no fights. No bitter words, only a heartbreaking silence as they signed the papers and parted ways. Emily left with her dignity, refusing to beg or hold on to a man who no longer valued her presence. John, in turn, convinced himself that he was finally free to live the life he had always dreamed of. With Mia by his side, he stepped into his new world, ready to leave Emily and his past behind. At first, life with Mia was intoxicating. They traveled to exotic destinations, attended the most exclusive events, and became a power couple in social circles. Mia's beauty and charm were magnetic, and John reveled in the envy of those around him. Together, they were the epitome of success, a glamorous couple whose life seemed perfect from the outside. But as the months passed, John began to notice cracks in the foundation of his new life. Mia's interests were limited to parties, shopping, and social media. She had little patience for anything that required commitment or responsibility. She was uninterested in the deeper aspects of John's life, viewing him more as a symbol of status than a partner. When he shared moments of vulnerability, she dismissed them with a casual remark, her attention drifting back to her phone or the next glamorous event. John's loneliness grew. Despite the luxury surrounding him, he felt empty, longing for a connection that Mia couldn't provide. He began to reminisce about the simple life he'd shared with Emily. The long talks, the shared dreams, the love that was real and grounding. He missed her gentle touch, her quiet strength, and the way she made him feel like he was more than just his wealth or status. One night, as John lay awake in the vast, silent emptiness of his mansion, he felt a profound sense of regret. The wealth, the fame, the luxury, it all felt meaningless without someone who genuinely understood him. In chasing a life of success and validation, he had lost the one person who had loved him for who he truly was. The reality hit him like a cold wave. He had sacrificed a love built on trust, sacrifice, and shared dreams for a life of superficial pleasures and empty relationships. The world he once thought he wanted felt hollow. A mere illusion that had cost him the one thing he now realized he truly wanted, the warmth, love, and companionship he had left behind with Emily. And so, in the dead of night, John was left alone with his thoughts, haunted by memories of the woman who had once stood by his side, supporting him through every hardship, believing in him when no one else did. His heart ached with a regret so deep, it consumed him. He had chased a dream, only to find himself lost, yearning for a love he had taken for granted. For the first time in his life, John questioned everything he had built. He wondered if he had truly won or if, in his pursuit of success, he had lost everything that mattered. And as he lay there, his mind replayed a single, painful thought. He had given up the love of his life, the woman who had made him whole, for a life that now felt empty and incomplete in the stillness of his grand, empty mansion. John's thoughts drifted further into memories of Emily. Every corner of the house, once filled with guests and laughter, now felt cold and void. His wealth, which he once wore like armor, now felt heavy, weighing him down with every reminder of what he had lost. The quiet haunted him, and in it, he could almost hear Emily's gentle voice, see her warm smile, and feel the comfort of her embrace that had once been his refuge from the world. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became to John that his life with Mia was nothing more than a glittering illusion. Mia cared only about the thrill of the moment, the superficial pleasures that came with wealth and fame. She had little interest in John beyond the status he represented. With her, there were no quiet evenings of real connection. No warmth to come home to. And no one to confide in. It became evident that he was no longer a person to her, he was an accessory. A trophy in her glamorous world. One evening, at yet another extravagant party filled with faces he barely recognized, John found himself standing in the corner, watching Mia as she effortlessly charmed the crowd. She was dazzling, surrounded by admirers. But as John watched her, he felt nothing but emptiness. The laughter, the flashing cameras, the endless flow of champagne, it was all noise to him now. He realized he felt more alone in that crowded room than he ever had in the quiet, simple life he once shared with Emily. It was in that moment that the weight of his choices settled fully upon him. He could no longer ignore the ache that had been growing inside him. The gnawing sense that he had sacrificed something real for a life that felt increasingly hollow. It struck him just how far he had fallen from the man he used to be, a man who once valued love, loyalty, and integrity over fleeting pleasures and shallow admiration. As the weeks dragged on, John's restlessness grew. The superficial conversations, the empty routines, and the hollow companionship with Mia all felt meaningless. He tried to rekindle the spark, to find joy in the life he had chosen. But the more he tried, the more he found himself longing for Emily. He thought about reaching out to her, but shame held him back. He had left her behind so easily, convinced he was moving toward something better. How could he now admit to her, or even to himself, that he had been so wrong? Driven by guilt and longing, John began visiting places he and Emily had once frequented. He would walk past their favorite coffee shop, where they'd spent hours talking about dreams and the future, or sit on the park bench where they'd watched sunsets together, holding hands and feeling as if they were the only two people in the world. Every place brought back a flood of memories that both comforted and tormented him, reminding him of the life he had once held so close and the love he had so carelessly let slip away. One day, as he walked through an old neighborhood they used to visit, John's phone buzzed. It was Mia, reminding him of another event they were expected to attend. He stared at the message, feeling an overwhelming urge to throw the phone away and disappear, to leave behind a life that felt more like a prison than the success he had once dreamed of. He realized, then, that the life he had chosen was not his own, it was a performance. A hollow spectacle staged for an audience that cared nothing for him as a person. The days stretched into weeks, and the loneliness became unbearable. John had tried everything to fill the void, to ignore the regret gnawing at his heart. But the truth remained, he had loved Emily deeply, and she had loved him back in a way no one else ever could. She had been his safe haven, his reason to strive. And now, without her, all his wealth and status felt like nothing more than burdens. In his solitude, John finally acknowledged what he had denied for so long. He had made a mistake, one that could never be undone by money or status. He had traded away a life of real love and joy for an illusion, and he was left paying the price of that choice. It was a price far heavier than he had ever imagined, one that no amount of wealth could relieve. Haunted by regret and the realization of his mistakes, John sat alone in his mansion. A man who had everything yet felt he had nothing at all. His heart, once filled with dreams and ambition, was now hollow, filled only with the echoes of a love he had taken for granted and a life he could never reclaim. As the nights grew longer and the emptiness deepened, John found himself faced with a choice: continue down this path of isolation and regret or confront the mistakes of his past, no matter the cost. And with a heart heavy with sorrow, he made a silent promise to find a way, however difficult, to right his wrongs and seek redemption. even if it meant risking everything he had gained. Months passed, and John's internal struggle only deepened. Despite his growing wealth and high-profile lifestyle, he felt like he was drifting through life. A man surrounded by luxuries yet starved of real connection. He had built a life of grandeur, but he began to understand that it was hollow without the love and warmth he once shared with Emily. One evening, John was invited to attend a charity gala, a highly publicized event brimming with society's elite. Mia, as usual, was more excited about the photographers and the attention than the cause. John arrived, feeling the weight of his empty life pressing heavily upon him. As he moved through the glittering crowd, making polite small talk and offering strained smiles, he felt increasingly out of place. Just as he was about to retreat to the balcony for a moment of solitude, his gaze fell on a woman across the room. She stood quietly by herself, radiating a grace and warmth that seemed to draw people in. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was Emily. She looked different, yet more radiant than he had ever seen her. Gone was the timid woman who once stood in his shadow, replaced by someone strong and self-assured. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her eyes sparkling with the kindness he remembered so well. But what caught him by surprise was the presence of 3 small children standing by her side, 2 boys and a girl, all around 5 years old, with familiar features that he recognized instantly. His heart stopped as realization dawned on him. These children bore his eyes, his smile. They were his. Emily had moved on, built a life without him, a life that included 3 beautiful children who shared his blood. The knowledge hit him like a punch to the gut. A tidal wave of emotions crashing over him: surprise, confusion, regret, and a bittersweet joy that left him reeling. In that moment, he realized he hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost a family he never knew existed. Without thinking, he made his way over to Emily, his heart pounding. She saw him approaching and froze, her calm demeanor giving way to a flicker of apprehension. But she held her head high, her gaze steady, meeting his eyes with a strength that both intimidated and captivated him. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's been a long time." She nodded, her face revealing no bitterness or anger, just a quiet acceptance that shook him to his core. "Yes, it has," she replied softly, her eyes searching his face, as if looking for the man she once knew. His eyes shifted to the children, who looked up at him with innocent curiosity. They were beautiful, healthy, happy, and full of life. For a moment, he felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, a longing he couldn't ignore. He crouched down, his gaze softening as he took in their faces. "These are they?" His voice cracked, overwhelmed by the weight of the question. Emily nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, John. These are your children. They were born shortly after we parted ways." John felt a lump in his throat. His mind raced, trying to grasp the reality of the situation. He had missed everything: their first steps, their first words, every precious moment he should have shared with them. The regret he'd carried for months now expanded into something so overwhelming. It was nearly unbearable. How could he ever make up for the years he'd missed? The children, sensing his emotion, looked at him with wide eyes, unsure of who he was but instinctively drawn to him. One of the boys reached out, touching John's hand with a tentative curiosity. The small gesture shattered something inside him, and tears he could no longer hold back glistened in his eyes. Emily's expression softened, a trace of sadness in her gaze. She watched him with empathy, understanding the turmoil he was feeling but offering no judgment. She had moved on, rebuilt her life, and raised their children alone. And despite everything, she looked at him now not with resentment but with the grace and kindness that defined her. "I didn't tell you, John, because I didn't want them to be a burden to you," she said gently. "I wanted to raise them in peace, without the chaos of a life that neither of us wanted anymore." Her words cut deep, forcing John to confront the reality he had tried to avoid for so long. He had left her in search of a life he thought would bring him happiness, only to find himself lost and empty. And now, standing before her, he realized he had abandoned the one thing that truly mattered. Overwhelmed, John took a deep breath, his voice breaking as he spoke. "Emily, I had no idea. If I had known, I would have." She raised a hand, stopping him. "John, it's okay. Life took us in different directions. I only want what's best for them now." The words stung, not because of their coldness, but because of their kindness. He realized she wasn't looking for an apology or an explanation. She had moved forward with her life, carrying the weight of their past alone, while he had chased empty dreams. Now, he stood at a crossroads, facing the consequences of his choices. That night, he lay awake, haunted by the image of his children, their bright eyes, innocent smiles, and the sense of belonging he had felt in their presence. He knew he couldn't simply walk away this time. He had lost too much, and he was determined to find a way back into their lives, to be the father he had failed to be. But he also knew that it wouldn't be easy. Emily had no reason to let him back in, and he had no right to ask. The next day, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, John began reaching out to Emily. Slowly, carefully, he attended events he knew she would be at, making gentle attempts to speak with her, to show her that he was genuinely sorry, that he wanted to be a part of their children's lives. Each encounter brought him a little closer to her, but she remained guarded, protective of the life she had built. Yet, gradually, John's persistent efforts began to break down the barriers between them. He showed up at their school events, cheering from the sidelines, offering to help with their homework, learning their favorite foods, and trying to become the father they deserved. Emily watched him, her heart torn between protecting her children and giving him the chance to prove himself. In these moments, John rediscovered the man he once was, the man Emily had loved. The man who had once dreamed of a life built on love, loyalty, and family. The emptiness that had haunted him began to fade, replaced by a quiet joy he hadn't known in years. With each smile from his children, each shared moment with Emily, he felt his heart healing, filling with the love he had thought he'd lost forever. But John knew that this journey was far from over. He was determined to win back Emily's trust, to make amends for the pain he had caused, and to build a future with his family, a future that held more meaning than all the wealth and power he had once pursued. And so, with a heart renewed and a soul strengthened, he prepared to face the greatest challenge of his life, earning back the love and trust of the woman he had once lost and the family he had almost missed after their chance encounter at the charity gala. John's life is shaken to its core. Seeing Emily again, with the 3 children who so clearly share his features, ignites a deep, unexpected longing. These children are his triplets he never knew existed. In one moment, his carefully constructed world of wealth and status collapses, leaving him reeling with regret. All the years he spent chasing a life of luxury now feel empty, eclipsed by the realization that he abandoned the most precious parts of his life without even knowing it. In the days that follow, John cannot shake the image of his children's innocent faces or the grace in Emily's forgiving smile. Memories of their life together resurface, those simple, Joyful moments he had once taken for granted. Alone in his mansion, John wrestles with the painful understanding that he traded a life filled with love and genuine connection for one steeped in shallow, fleeting pleasures. And now, he realizes, the void he feels cannot be filled by anything money can buy. Driven by a powerful need to reconnect, John begins reaching out to Emily. At first, she is wary, her protective instincts strong after years of raising their children alone. She permits only brief, supervised visits, keeping her guard up, unwilling to let John disrupt the stable life she has created. Yet, despite her reservations, she can't ignore the visible change in him. Gone is the man obsessed with status and luxury, in his place stands a man humbled by his mistakes, longing to make amends. Gradually, John earns more time with the children. He joins them for small outings, a day at the zoo, a visit to the park, each moment helping him rebuild the bond he lost. At first, the children are cautious, not fully understanding who he is. But John patiently learns how to be a father. He cherishes every smile, every laugh, and each small gesture of trust from them. These moments are filled with meaning, renewing a sense of purpose within him. The joy he once sought through wealth now blossoms simply in being present for his children. One evening, after a particularly joyful day with the children, John finds himself alone with Emily. They sit in silence for a moment, the air filled with unspoken words and shared memories. Summoning his courage, John expresses the regret that has haunted him since they met again. He apologizes sincerely for his mistakes, for the pain he caused her, and for the years he missed with their children. Emily listens quietly, her expression softening as she senses the depth of his remorse. "I didn't know what I was losing until it was gone," he admits, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I could go back and change everything, I would. But all I can do now is try to be here, for you and for them." Emily's eyes are filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She tells him that trust isn't something easily rebuilt, but she acknowledges the sincerity of his efforts. For the first time, she begins to believe that he might truly have changed. Her walls remain, but they are softer now, allowing glimpses of hope to shine through. John's journey back into Emily and the children's lives is far from easy. Each day requires patience and humility. As he learns to put their needs before his own, he finds himself filled with a quiet, fulfilling joy in the small routines of fatherhood, helping with homework, cheering at soccer games, and reading bedtime stories. These moments, while ordinary, are profoundly meaningful. And with each one, he feels himself becoming the man Emily once loved, the man he once aspired to be. In time, Emily's guarded demeanor softens. She begins inviting him to family gatherings, allowing him to take on a larger role. Together, they create new memories, slowly rebuilding the foundation they once shared. Though there is still healing to be done, both John and Emily realize that their story isn't over, it is evolving, shaped by forgiveness, growth, and a shared love for their children. Through this journey, John discovers that true wealth lies not in the things he once chased but in the love and connection he almost lost. He has finally come home. Not to a mansion, but to a family, one that offers a chance at redemption and a future filled with love after their encounter at the charity gala. John couldn't shake the image of Emily and their children. Every night, he replayed the scene, Emily's serene strength, the children's innocent smiles, their familiar eyes mirroring his own. He was a father, had been a father for years, and yet, he'd missed it all. In that moment, surrounded by luxury and status, John felt more lost than ever, realizing he had sacrificed his family for an illusion of happiness. The next morning, He reached out to Emily, asking if he could see the children. His message was simple, almost pleading, and he waited anxiously for her reply. Days passed with no response, each hour thick with worry and regret. Finally, Emily responded, agreeing to meet him in a public park with the children. But her words were clear and firm: he was there only as a visitor, not as their father. She was cautious, wary of letting him too close, determined to protect the world she had built without him. The park was quiet that afternoon, filled with the sounds of children playing and the gentle rustle of leaves. John arrived early, his heart pounding as he scanned the path, waiting for Emily and the children. When they appeared, he was struck again by how much he had missed the children's laughter, their bright eyes, the way they held Emily's hands as if she were their entire world. They approached slowly, Emily watching him with a guarded expression, her motherly instinct evident in the way she kept the children close. When they finally reached him, John crouched down, meeting his children's gazes. He introduced himself simply, softly, not expecting them to understand, but wanting them to know he was here. The children looked up at Emily, seeking reassurance, and she nodded gently, her expression softening just a fraction. They looked back at him, curiosity brightening their eyes. And one of them, his daughter, offered a shy smile that made his heart swell with a mix of joy and sorrow. Over the next few weeks, John joined them for short visits, carefully respecting the boundaries Emily set. Each outing felt like a gift, an opportunity to step closer to the life he had abandoned. With each visit, he learned a little more about his children, their favorite toys, their small quirks, the way they lit up when they were with Emily. His daughter loved to draw, often handing him crayon portraits she'd made, while one of his sons was fascinated with animals, eagerly sharing his newfound facts about every creature they encountered at the zoo. Slowly, the children began to trust him, warming to his presence with a natural openness. Every time one of them took his hand or smiled at him, John felt a piece of himself heal. He hadn't expected these moments to be so profound, but each one brought him closer to understanding what he had missed, the depth of love and connection that came from being truly present for those you loved. Through it all, Emily remained vigilant. She observed John carefully, her eyes always guarded, testing to see if his intentions were genuine. One evening, after a particularly joyful day with the children at the park, John asked to speak with her alone. They stood a short distance from the children, who played together in the fading light, unaware of the tension between their parents. "Emily, I know I've made terrible mistakes," he began, his voice heavy with remorse. "I was blind, chasing after things that never mattered. I left you. I left all of this behind, thinking I wanted something better. But I was wrong. And now, all I want is to be here. To be with them, to be the father they deserve. If you'll let me." Emily's gaze softened, though her expression remained guarded. "You say that now, John. But being a parent, being present, it's more than a few visits. It's sacrifice, patience, and love. I've raised them alone for years. They know me, they trust me. I won't risk their happiness on a whim." Her words cut deep, but John accepted them with humility. "I know I have no right to ask you to trust me again," he replied. "But I want to prove myself, not for me, but for them. Please, Emily, let me try." Emily studied him for a long moment, seeing in his face a mixture of the man she once loved and the man who had abandoned her. But there was something new in his eyes, a quiet resolve, a willingness to face the consequences of his choices. With a sigh, she nodded, granting him the chance to earn his way back. Though she warned him again, trust wasn't given easily. And if he faltered, she would shield their children from his mistakes without hesitation. From that day on, John dedicated himself to his children. He attended every school event, helped with homework, and learned their routines. Each day, he became a little more like the father he should have been all along. The children began calling him Dad, a word that filled him with both pride and humility. Every time they ran to him with excitement, every hug and laugh felt like a blessing. A second chance he vowed never to take for granted. As time passed, Emily began to soften, her guarded demeanor giving way to glimpses of warmth. She saw the effort John was making, the sacrifices he was willing to embrace to be a true father. She observed how he'd stay late to finish homework with the children, how he'd cook their favorite meals, how he'd sit patiently through every story and question. She couldn't deny the sincerity in his actions. It was a sincerity she hadn't seen since their early days together. One evening, as they all shared a quiet dinner, Emily looked across the table at John, her expression unreadable. The children chatted excitedly, filling the room with laughter. And in that moment, they felt like a family again. John met her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. She was beginning to forgive, to allow herself the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something from the ashes of the past. After the children went to bed, Emily invited John to stay a while longer. They sat in the living room, surrounded by memories and years of shared history. She spoke openly for the first time, telling him of the hardships she'd faced alone, the nights she'd stayed up worrying, the joy and exhaustion of raising triplets without a partner. John listened, every word a reminder of the burden he'd left her to carry alone. "I never stopped loving you, John," she admitted softly, her voice laced with vulnerability. "But you left, and I had to move on. I had to build a life for our children without you. And I've protected that life fiercely." "I know," he replied, his voice breaking. "And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm here now. And I want to do right by you, by all of you." A long silence settled between them, filled with the unspoken words of years apart, the pain and love woven together. Emily reached for his hand, a small gesture that held the weight of her cautious hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that John's transformation was real, that the man before her was willing to honor the family he had once abandoned. Their journey back to one another was slow, filled with moments of doubt, healing, and growth. John continued to prove himself, not through grand gestures but through the steady, everyday acts of love and presence. And with each day, he grew closer to the life he had once thrown away, the life that was now his greatest treasure. By the time the children's next birthday arrived, they were a family once more. Not perfect, but bound by love, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to one another. John knew there was no going back to who they had once been. But there was beauty in who they were now, a family rebuilt on the foundation of hard-earned trust and a love that had endured, even through the hardest of times. And as John watched Emily smile, surrounded by their children, he realized he had found his way back to the true wealth in his life, the love of a family that, against all odds, had found its way back together. As months turned into a year, John's commitment to his family grew deeper, becoming woven into every aspect of his life. He no longer chased after the things he once thought were important: wealth, status, the approval of strangers. Instead, he poured his energy into being present, into showing up for the little moments that built the bond between him, his children, and Emily. They weren't just a family on paper, they were becoming a family in heart and spirit. Every day was a new opportunity for John to make up for lost time, and he embraced each one wholeheartedly. He learned the rhythm of their household. The way Emily hummed while cooking breakfast. The games his children loved to play. And their bedtime rituals. He found joy in these simple acts. Each one a reminder of the life he had longed for and finally found. The happiness he felt was no longer fleeting or superficial, it was deep, steady, and genuine. One evening, after putting the children to bed, John found himself sitting on the porch with Emily, sharing a quiet moment as the sun set. They had spent countless evenings like this in the past year, talking about life, their children, and the new memories they were building together. But tonight felt different, like the beginning of something new. "Emily," he began softly, looking out at the fading light, "I want you to know. I'm here for the long haul. I know I hurt you. And I can't change the past. But I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you, and to them, that I'm a better man now. That I'm here to stay." Emily looked at him, her expression thoughtful, a mixture of kindness and hesitation in her eyes. She had forgiven him. Yes. But trust, she knew, was something built slowly. One brick at a time. The journey toward rebuilding a life together was not without challenges. As John settled into the rhythms of family life, he found himself facing new trials, moments that tested his resolve, his patience, and his commitment to the family he had fought so hard to regain. While their day-to-day life was filled with joy and laughter, there were also shadows of the past that lingered. Moments when doubt would creep into Emily's gaze, or when the scars of his absence would surface in unexpected ways. One evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, one of the children, curious and perceptive, asked a question that no one was prepared for. "Dad, why weren't you here before? Why did you leave us and Mom?" The question hung in the air, the room falling silent as John looked at Emily, his heart tightening. He had hoped that, in time, his children would simply come to accept his presence without questioning the past. But he knew they deserved the truth, an answer, honest yet sensitive, to help them understand the choices he had made and the man he had become. With a deep breath, John spoke gently, looking each child in the eyes. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice steady but filled with remorse. "I thought I wanted things that, in the end, weren't important. I didn't realize how much I needed you and your mom until it was too late. But I'm here now, and I promise I'll never leave again." Emily watched the exchange, her heart softening as she saw the way John handled their children's questions. She saw his sincerity, his regret, and the quiet determination in his eyes. He was no longer the man who had left them behind, he was a man transformed, committed to being the father and husband he had once failed to be. And yet, she couldn't deny that moments like these still stirred a lingering fear, a part of her that struggled to fully trust again. As the weeks passed, they continued to build their life together, facing the ups and downs that came with blending the past and the present. John and Emily attended school events as a unified front, worked on family projects, and created new traditions that brought them closer. But the path wasn't always smooth. The old wounds would sometimes resurface in unexpected ways, a hesitation in Emily's embrace, a flash of doubt when John stayed late at work, a tense silence when the ghosts of his former life reappeared. One day, Mia, John's ex-partner, appeared at his office unannounced. She was as glamorous as ever, bringing with her the echoes of the life he had left behind. She tried to rekindle their connection, casting doubt on the choices he had made, questioning whether he could truly be content with a life so far from the elite circles they once inhabited. "You really think you're happy, John?" she asked, her tone both incredulous and mocking. "This small-town life, playing house, it isn't you." You're meant for more. The world we had, it's still out there. Waiting. But John met her gaze with a steady resolve that surprised even him. I was never truly happy in that world. Mia, he replied firmly. The life I have now, Emily. My children, that's what matters to me. I made my choice. And I'm not looking back. Mia left. But her visit shook him, bringing forth doubts he thought he had left behind. He wondered if he could ever fully escape the man he had once been, or if some part of him would always be bound to the mistakes of his past. That evening, as he returned home, he noticed Emily's quiet watchfulness. Sensing the unspoken questions in her eyes, he felt a pang of guilt, realizing how much his former life still haunted them both. In a moment of vulnerability, he shared the encounter with Emily, telling her everything. He didn't hide his doubts, nor did he downplay the pull his former life still had on him. But he assured her of one thing, that he was here, now and always, committed to their family above all else. Emily listened, her expression thoughtful, and then reached for his hand. Thank you for telling me, she said, her voice soft. I know that rebuilding trust isn't easy. There will always be doubts and fears, but the only way forward is together. And I believe in the man you're becoming. John. Her words renewed his strength, reminding him that the journey they were on required both courage and patience. He saw, in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, proof that love, even scarred and bruised, could endure and thrive if nurtured with honesty and care. As the months wore on, John found ways to deepen his bond with his children. He became their biggest cheerleader, attending every game, recital, and parent-teacher conference. He taught them life skills, helped with homework, and even planned small surprises to show how much he loved them. They trusted him now, calling him Dad with warmth and pride. And he treasured every moment, knowing he had been given a second chance at fatherhood, a chance he would never take for granted. Emily, too, began to relax, her trust in John growing with each day he stood by her side. They started planning for the future together, talking about their dreams, their hopes, and the life they wanted to build as a family. John proposed the idea of renewing their wedding vows, a ceremony not just for them but for their children, a promise to love and support each other, this time with a deeper understanding of what commitment truly meant. On the day of the vow renewal, they gathered in a quiet, sunlit garden surrounded by close friends and family. Their children, dressed in simple but beautiful outfits, served as their witnesses, their small hands clasped together as they watched their parents take the next step in their journey. John and Emily exchanged vows that were no longer just words but promises carved out of years of growth, pain, and healing. They pledged to honor the love they had rebuilt and to face whatever life brought their way, knowing that they were stronger together. As John looked into Emily's eyes, he saw not only the love they shared but the resilience that had brought them back to each other. He saw the forgiveness she had offered, the grace with which she had led him back into her life, and the strength that had carried their family through. And in that moment, he knew he was finally home. Their family continued to grow in love, facing life's challenges with a newfound unity. Those scars from the past remained. They no longer haunted them, instead, they served as reminders of the strength it took to overcome, the resilience that bound them, and the love that would carry them forward. Each day was a testament to the journey they had taken, the mistakes they had overcome, and the future they had reclaimed together. John had once been a man driven by ambition, blinded by desires that had led him astray. But through the grace of second chances, he had found the true wealth in his life, the love of a family that had forgiven him, welcomed him back, and helped him rediscover the man he was always meant to be. Their home was no longer a mansion filled with empty rooms but a sanctuary filled with laughter, love, and the memories they were creating together. John held Emily close each night, knowing that no fortune, no status, could ever compare to the gift of being by her side and watching their children grow. In the end, he had found his greatest joy not in the pursuit of worldly success but in the warmth and resilience of a love that had been lost and found anew. And so, as they stood together, watching their children play under the fading light of a new day, they knew they had come full circle. They were not perfect, and life would continue to bring its trials. But they were ready, bound by a love that had withstood the test of time and emerged unbreakable and enduring. "I know, John," she replied, her voice warm but cautious. "I see the way you've changed, the way you love them. And I've let you back into their lives, and into mine. But part of me still wonders if this is real, if this is something that will last." Her honesty stung, but John respected it. She had every right to doubt, to protect herself and their children. He reached for her hand, gently holding it between his own. "I understand, Emily. And I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. I'll keep showing up. Every day. For as long as you need me to. I want to earn back your trust. Not just with words, but with actions. You and the kids are my family. And that's something I will never take for granted again." Emily nodded, a small smile breaking through, touched by the sincerity in his words. "You already have, John. Just keep being here. That's all we need." Over the next few months, the walls between them continued to fall. One by one. Slowly, Emily allowed herself to let go of the pain of the past, embracing the love she had once thought lost forever. John's unwavering presence and dedication made it easier for her to believe in him again. They began sharing more secrets, dreams, and fears, and with each passing day, their connection deepened. Not as a couple rebuilding a fractured past, but as two people discovering each other anew. The children sensed the change too. Their parents' growing closeness brought them joy. And the laughter that filled the house was genuine. The happiness real. They were no longer just a family by chance but a family by choice. Bound by a love that had endured the hardest of tests. One night, as they sat together watching their children play in the yard, John turned to Emily, his heart full. He felt a gratitude he could hardly express. For the chance to be here. To live this life he had once abandoned and now cherished more than anything. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve this. But I'm so grateful for you, for all of this." She looked at him, her eyes soft and filled with warmth. "You're here, John. That's what matters. You're here. And you're with us. That's all we ever needed." In the months that followed, they continued to grow as a family. They celebrated birthdays together, made new traditions, and created memories that would last a lifetime. John never took a moment for granted, cherishing the life he had nearly lost. And Emily, having opened her heart once more, found joy in the love that had returned to her life, stronger and more resilient than before. Eventually, John and Emily remarried. Not as a restoration of their old life but as a new beginning. One built on the lessons of the past and the strength they had gained through their journey together. Surrounded by their children and closest friends, they exchanged vows again, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all of life's ups and downs. And this time, they both knew that those promises would be kept, not out of duty, but out of a love that had been tested and come through stronger than ever. Their family, once fractured, was whole again, bound by forgiveness, resilience, and a love that had never truly died. And as John held Emily's hand, watching their children laugh and play, he knew he had found the truest wealth of all, not in riches or status, but in the warmth of family and the grace of second chances. The life they shared now was one of quiet moments and deep joy. A testament to the power of love to heal, to forgive, and to transform. It was a life John would treasure forever. A life that reminded him, each day, of the precious gift he had been given, a gift he would never let go of again. The journey toward rebuilding a life together was not without challenges. As John settled into the rhythms of family life, he found himself facing new trials, moments that tested his resolve, his patience, and his commitment to the family he had fought so hard to regain. While their day-to-day life was filled with joy and laughter, there were also shadows of the past that lingered. Moments when doubt would creep into Emily's gaze, or when the scars of his absence would surface in unexpected ways. One evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, one of the children, curious and perceptive, asked a question that no one was prepared for. "Dad, why weren't you here before? Why did you leave us and Mom?" The question hung in the air, the room falling silent as John looked at Emily, his heart tightening. He had hoped that, in time, his children would simply come to accept his presence without questioning the past. But he knew they deserved the truth, an answer, honest yet sensitive, to help them understand the choices he had made and the man he had become. With a deep breath, John spoke gently, looking each child in the eyes. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice steady but filled with remorse. "I thought I wanted things that, in the end, weren't important. I didn't realize how much I needed you and your mom until it was too late. But I'm here now, and I promise I'll never leave again." Emily watched the exchange, her heart softening as she saw the way John handled their children's questions. She saw his sincerity, his regret, and the quiet determination in his eyes. He was no longer the man who had left them behind, he was a man transformed, committed to being the father and husband he had once failed to be. And yet, she couldn't deny that moments like these still stirred a lingering fear, a part of her that struggled to fully trust again. As the weeks passed, they continued to build their life together, facing the ups and downs that came with blending the past and the present. John and Emily attended school events as a unified front, worked on family projects, and created new traditions that brought them closer. But the path wasn't always smooth. The old wounds would sometimes resurface in unexpected ways, a hesitation in Emily's embrace, a flash of doubt when John stayed late at work, a tense silence when the ghosts of his former life reappeared. One day, Mia, John's ex-partner, appeared at his office unannounced. She was as glamorous as ever, bringing with her the echoes of the life he had left behind. She tried to rekindle their connection, casting doubt on the choices he had made, questioning whether he could truly be content with a life so far from the elite circles they once inhabited. "You really think you're happy, John?" she asked, her tone both incredulous and mocking. "This small-town life, playing house, it isn't you. You're meant for more. The world we had, it's still out there, waiting." But John met her gaze with a steady resolve that surprised even him. "I was never truly happy in that world, Mia," he replied firmly. "The life I have now, Emily, my children, that's what matters to me. I made my choice, and I'm not looking back." Mia left, but her visit shook him, bringing forth doubts he thought he had left behind. He wondered if he could ever fully escape the man he had once been, or if some part of him would always be bound to the mistakes of his past. That evening, as he returned home, he noticed Emily's quiet watchfulness, sensing the unspoken questions in her eyes. He felt a pang of guilt. realizing how much his former life still haunted them both. In a moment of vulnerability, he shared the encounter with Emily, telling her everything. He didn't hide his doubts, nor did he downplay the pull his former life still had on him. But he assured her of one thing, that he was here, now and always, committed to their family above all else. Emily listened, her expression thoughtful, and then reached for his hand. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice soft. "I know that rebuilding trust isn't easy. There will always be doubts and fears, but the only way forward is together. And I believe in the man you're becoming, John." Her words renewed his strength, reminding him that the journey they were on required both courage and patience. He saw, in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, proof that love, even scarred and bruised, could endure and thrive if nurtured with honesty and care. As the months wore on, John found ways to deepen his bond with his children. He became their biggest cheerleader, attending every game, recital, and parent-teacher conference. He taught them life skills, helped with homework, and even planned small surprises to show how much he loved them. They trusted him now, calling him Dad with warmth and pride. And he treasured every moment, knowing he had been given a second chance at fatherhood, a chance he would never take for granted. Emily, too, began to relax, her trust in John growing with each day he stood by her side. They started planning for the future together, talking about their dreams, their hopes, and the life they wanted to build as a family. John proposed the idea of renewing their wedding vows, a ceremony not just for them but for their children, a promise to love and support each other, this time with a deeper understanding of what commitment truly meant. On the day of the vow renewal, they gathered in a quiet, sunlit garden surrounded by close friends and family. Their children, dressed in simple but beautiful outfits, served as their witnesses, their small hands clasped together as they watched their parents take the next step in their journey. John and Emily exchanged vows that were no longer just words but promises carved out of years of growth, pain, and healing. They pledged to honor the love they had rebuilt and to face whatever life brought their way, knowing that they were stronger together. As John looked into Emily's eyes, he saw not only the love they shared but the resilience that had brought them back to each other. He saw the forgiveness she had offered, the grace with which she had led him back into her life, and the strength that had carried their family through. And in that moment, he knew he was finally home. Their family continued to grow in love, facing life's challenges with a newfound unity. Those scars from the past remained. They no longer haunted them, instead, they served as reminders of the strength it took to overcome, the resilience that bound them, and the love that would carry them forward. Each day was a testament to the journey they had taken, the mistakes they had overcome, and the future they had reclaimed together. John had once been a man driven by ambition, blinded by desires that had led him astray. But through the grace of second chances, he had found the true wealth in his life, the love of a family that had forgiven him, welcomed him back, and helped him rediscover the man he was always meant to be. Their home was no longer a mansion filled with empty rooms but a sanctuary filled with laughter, love, and the memories they were creating together. John held Emily close each night, knowing that no fortune, no status, could ever compare to the gift of being by her side and watching their children grow. In the end, he had found his greatest joy not in the pursuit of worldly success but in the warmth and resilience of a love that had been lost and found anew. And so, as they stood together, watching their children play under the fading light of a new day, they knew they had come full circle. They were not perfect, and life would continue to bring its trials. But they were ready, bound by a love that had withstood the test of time and emerged unbreakable and enduring as John continued to build his life with Emily and their children. He found joy in every ordinary moment, a quiet family dinner, helping his kids with homework, and spending precious time with Emily. Yet, despite his deepening commitment, shadows from the past occasionally lingered, testing his resolve and stirring doubts in both their hearts. One evening, their youngest child, curious and innocent, asked John a question that stung. "Dad, why did you leave us before?" The question was unexpected, and it pierced through John, forcing him to face the painful truth. He explained with honesty, his voice filled with regret. "I made mistakes and thought I wanted things that didn't matter. But I promise I'll never leave again." Emily, watching from across the room, felt a mixture of relief and sadness as she saw the depth of John's sincerity. She began to believe that he truly had changed, though her own fears of abandonment still lingered. Determined to make amends, John spent individual days with each child, building unique bonds. He took his daughter to an art exhibit where he discovered her love for painting and took his son to a science museum, enjoying every moment of laughter and learning. Slowly, his children began to trust him, calling him Dad with a warmth that filled his heart. Each bond they built became another step in repairing the family. However, John's old life had a way of creeping back. One day, Mia, his former partner, reappeared unexpectedly, testing his commitment to his new life. Mia tried to remind him of the luxurious lifestyle they'd once shared, but John held firm, making it clear that he had no intention of going back. When he shared this encounter with Emily, he faced her lingering fears honestly, acknowledging how hard it was to leave his old life behind, but promising her that she and the children were all that mattered to him now. Emily saw his honesty and, for the first time, felt her doubts begin to dissolve. She opened her heart a little more, beginning to trust that this new version of John was here to stay. Gradually, they started to dream about a future together, one where they could fully leave the past behind. John proposed the idea of renewing their vows as a way to affirm their commitment, not just to each other, but to the family they had become. Emily agreed, and together with the children, they prepared for a simple, intimate ceremony. The children helped pick flowers, make decorations, and created little cards to give to their parents, each gesture reinforcing the bond they shared. On the day of the ceremony, family and close friends gathered to witness the renewal of John and Emily's vows. Holding hands, John and Emily exchanged promises that went beyond words, symbolizing years of growth, forgiveness, and the love they had rebuilt. Their children looked on, their faces glowing with joy, as their parents pledged to walk this path together. With their vows renewed, the family celebrated, sharing food, laughter, and memories. Finally at peace, John realized he had gained something far more valuable than the riches he once chased, the unwavering love of a family he almost lost. Now, their home was filled not only with love but with the strength of a family that had overcome the past. As the sun set, John and Emily stood side by side, watching their children play, knowing they had found a love that would carry them forward, a love resilient, unbreakable, and, above all, real. In the days following their vow renewal, John's life felt richer and fuller than he had ever imagined. Each morning, he woke with a renewed sense of purpose, grateful for the family he had nearly lost. His children, once guarded, now ran to him with open arms, their trust in him deepening each day. Emily, too, had begun to truly trust again, her smiles and laughter now free from the hesitations that had lingered in the early days of his return. But even with the joy they shared, the journey was not without its challenges. John knew that his past mistakes would always cast a shadow, and the weight of his former life still lingered, occasionally resurfacing in unexpected ways. One afternoon, he received an invitation to a high-profile business event, a lucrative opportunity that would require travel and time away. He hesitated, tempted by the success and recognition it promised. But he quickly realized that the price was too high. Choosing his family, he declined the offer, knowing he was exactly where he wanted to be. Emily noticed his decision and felt a deeper trust growing within her. Seeing John prioritize their family over everything else was the assurance she needed. A quiet confirmation that his transformation was real. She looked at him with a new warmth, her heart finally at peace, free from the lingering doubts she had once harbored. They began to create new family traditions that filled their home with joy. Friday game nights became a cherished ritual, with laughter echoing through the house as they played board games together. Weekends were spent on small adventures, picnics, trips to the zoo, and hiking excursions where John taught the children about nature and encouraged their curiosity. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of shared experiences and memories they would carry with them forever. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, John and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the stars. It was a quiet moment, one that felt heavy with meaning as they held hands. Knowing how far they had come, John turned to her, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and love. "Emily," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I used to think happiness was something you chased. But I realize now it's something you build, piece by piece, with the people you love. Thank you for letting me be a part of this." Emily looked back at him, her eyes glistening. "We built this together, John. And now, it's ours to cherish and protect. This is our second chance. And I believe we're finally home." The days turned into seasons, and as the years passed, John and Emily's love only grew stronger. They continued to nurture their family, supporting each other through life's ups and downs with a love forged through forgiveness, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to one another. On one of their children's birthdays, as they gathered around the table to celebrate, John looked around at the smiling faces of his family and felt a profound sense of peace. He realized that this was the life he had always wanted, even if he hadn't known it at the time. The mistakes he had made were now lessons, reminders of the strength it took to rebuild a life from broken pieces. Their story was not one of perfection, but of grace and resilience. They had faced the hardest tests, overcome the deepest regrets, and emerged with a love that was now unshakable. John knew that, no matter what the future held, he would face it with Emily and their children by his side, bound by a love that had been lost and found again. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over their home, John and Emily stood hand in hand, watching their children play in the fading light. They had come full circle, and in the quiet peace of that moment, they knew they had found a love that would carry them forward, a love built on second chances, strengthened by forgiveness, and cherished every day of their lives.